The courtroom was silent, so silent that the sound of the judge's gavel hitting the desk echoed like thunder. Everyone's eyes were glued to the man standing in the middle of the room, his hands shaking as he held a small, crying baby in his arms. The baby's wails filled the air, piercing through the tension like a knife. The man, dressed in a wrinkled suit, looked around desperately, his eyes watery and filled with fake sorrow. "Please, Your Honor," he begged, his voice trembling. "I'm a father. This child needs me. Have mercy." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Some of the spectators wiped away tears. The man's lawyer patted his back, as if urging the judge to reconsider. The judge, an older man with sharp eyes, leaned forward in his chair. For a moment, it seemed like he was considering the plea, weighing the life of the innocent child in the man's arms against the crime he had committed. Then, suddenly, the judge slammed his gavel down. "This is a disgrace," he said, his voice booming. The entire courtroom froze. The man's face twisted with confusion. His lawyer stuttered, "Your Honor, surely you—" "I know exactly what you're trying to do," the judge interrupted. His eyes locked onto the suspects, cold and unshaken. The man tightened his grip on the baby, his entire body tense. The judge's next words sent shockwaves through the room. "That is not your child." A deafening silence fell over the courtroom. Before anyone could react, a woman's loud cry shattered the silence. "That's my baby!" she screamed from the back of the room. Chaos erupted. Hours before this shocking moment, the suspect, a man named Peter Langley, sat alone in a small, dimly lit apartment. His forehead was sweaty, and his hands were trembling as he looked at the newspaper in front of him. Langley to face Judge Walters tomorrow in high-profile fraud case. He swallowed hard. He was facing years in prison if the trial didn't go his way. He knew how harsh Judge Walters was. The man never showed sympathy. Peter needed a way out. As he chewed on his nails, his mind raced. He needed something to make the judge see him as a person, not a criminal. Something that would make him look pitiful. Then, an idea struck him like lightning. A baby. Who could send a father to prison when his innocent baby needed him? The judge would have to show some mercy, right? Peter's heart pounded as he grabbed his car keys. Hours later, under the cover of darkness, Peter found himself in a quiet neighborhood. He had been watching this house for days. A young mother lived here with her baby, a baby just the right age for his plan. He parked his car a block away and crept toward the back of the house. The window was slightly open. His breath quickened. Peter had never done something like this before, but he was desperate. Slowly, carefully, he reached inside, pushing the window open wider. He could hear the soft cooing of the baby inside. His hands shook as he reached into the crib, lifting the baby into his arms. The baby stirred but didn't cry. Peter exhaled in relief. He had done it. He quickly slipped back into the darkness, unaware that a baby monitor had captured the whole thing. The next morning, as the mother woke up, she felt something was off. Her heart started racing before she even opened her eyes. Then, the moment she turned to the crib, her world shattered. The crib was empty. Her screams filled the house. Meanwhile, Peter walked into the courthouse, dressed in his best suit. The baby was wrapped in a blanket in his arms. As he passed through the doors, people stared. Some whispered. No one expected to see a man on trial carrying a baby. He had planned this perfectly. Or so he thought. The moment the judge called his case, Peter walked forward, putting on his best performance. His hands trembled. His eyes were filled with fake tears. "Your Honor," he said, his voice cracking, "I am not just a man on trial. I am a father. A father to a child who needs me." The baby let out a small whimper in his arms, and Peter gently rocked him, looking as pitiful as possible. The room was silent. Some people looked moved. Even Peter's lawyer seemed surprised but quickly played along. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, "surely a man who has a child relying on him deserves leniency." Judge Walters remained quiet. He watched Peter for a long moment. Then, his eyes narrowed. He leaned forward. "Mr. Langley," the judge said slowly, "I don't recall any mention of you having a child." Peter's breath caught in his throat. I don't talk about my personal life much," he stammered. The judge didn't take his eyes off him. Then, the judge suddenly asked, "What's your child's name?" Peter blinked. His mind went blank. What was the baby's name? He didn't even know. He fumbled, his lips parting, but no words came out. That's when Judge Walters slammed his gavel down. "This is a disgrace," he said. "That is not your child." The courtroom gasped. Before Peter could react, a woman's cry came from the back of the room. "That's my baby." Peter's body went rigid. He turned to see a young woman standing, her face pale, her eyes filled with horror. People turned to look at her, then at Peter. Suddenly, the whole courtroom exploded in chaos. Security guards rushed forward. The mother pushed past people, trying to get to her baby. And Peter knew he was done for. Peter's heart pounded as security guards rushed toward him. The mother's cries grew louder, desperate, raw. "That's my baby. Give me back my baby." The baby in his arms started wailing again, sensing the tension in the room. Peter's grip tightened. His mind spun. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The judge had seen right through him. How? How had he known? "Mr. Langley," Judge Walters' voice cut through the noise, cold and commanding. "Hand over the child. Now." Peter's breathing was ragged. He took a step back, gripping the baby protectively. No, he couldn't go to prison. If they took the baby from him, his plan would be exposed completely. I can explain," Peter stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Enough," the judge snapped. "Officers, take the child from him." A guard lunged toward him, but Peter acted on pure instinct. He ran. Gasps filled the room. Chairs scraped against the floor as people jumped to their feet. Lawyers, journalists, and spectators watched in shock as Peter bolted toward the exit, the baby clutched tightly against his chest. "Stop him," someone yelled. The guards were fast, but Peter had the advantage of desperation. He weaved through the room, shoving past people, his mind screaming, "Run, run, run." The courthouse doors were just ahead. If he could make it outside, he could disappear into the crowd, figure out his next move. But just as his fingers touched the door handle, a hand clamped down hard on his shoulder. He was yanked back with such force that he lost his balance. He fell. The baby slipped from his arms. A scream tore through the courtroom as the child tumbled downward. Time slowed. Peter reached out, trying to grab the baby midair, his heart slamming against his ribs. Then, another pair of hands shot out, catching the baby just in time. It was the judge. Judge Walters, despite his age, had moved with lightning speed, catching the child before any harm could come to him. The room let out a collective breath of relief. Peter, still on the ground, looked up, his eyes wide, his body frozen. The judge cradled the baby gently, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he turned to Peter, his gaze sharp as steel. "Take him into custody," the judge ordered. The guards didn't hesitate. Before Peter could get up, strong hands grabbed him, yanking his arms behind his back. The click of handcuffs sent a final jolt of panic through him. "No, wait, please, He didn't get to finish. He was dragged to his feet, his body limp, his mind racing. How had everything gone so wrong so quickly? 30 minutes later, the courtroom was nearly empty. Peter sat in a holding cell beneath the courthouse, his head in his hands. His heart hadn't stopped hammering in his chest. He had been so close to making the judge feel sorry for him. Instead, he had been exposed as a liar, a fraud, and now, a kidnapper. Kidnapper. The word made his stomach churn. Would he even get a trial now? Or would they throw him in prison immediately? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a door creaking open. He looked up. Judge Walters stepped into the holding area, flanked by 2 officers. Peter's body tensed. The judge walked up to the cell, looking down at him with a gaze so piercing it felt like he could see straight into his soul. "You really thought you could fool me," the judge said. It wasn't a question. Peter swallowed hard. He trailed off. What could he say? That he was desperate? That he needed an out? That he had no other choice? Judge Walters shook his head. "You made a mistake, Langley. And this time, there's no talking your way out of it." Peter clenched his fists. He had to think of something. Anything. Then, the judge said something that made his blood run cold. You didn't just commit fraud. The judge's voice was low, controlled. You kidnapped a child. That's a federal crime. Peter's throat tightened. Federal crime. That meant longer prison time. Harsher punishment. No. 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 You don't understand. Peter tried again, panic rising in his voice. I wasn't going to hurt him. I just needed the court to see me differently. That child could have been hurt. The judge cut him off, his voice turning ice cold. Do you even know what you've done? Peter's mouth opened, but no words came out. The weight of it all hit him at once. He hadn't just faked a sob story. He hadn't just tried to gain sympathy. He had taken someone's baby, and now he was going to pay the price. Upstairs, the baby was safely back in his mother's arms. Tears streamed down her face as she rocked him, whispering, "Mommy's here. Mommy's here." The entire courtroom had been left shaken by what had happened. But one person in particular had been affected more than anyone else. The judge. As he returned to his chambers, Judge Walters sat down heavily in his chair, staring at the wall. This case was different from any he had ever handled, because he knew what it was like to lose a child. A long time ago, Judge Walters had lost his own son, and something about the look in that baby's eyes had reminded him of the child he had once held in his arms. For the first time in years, a case had rattled him. He closed his eyes. This wasn't over. Not yet. And before it was, more shocking truths were going to come to light. Peter sat in the cold holding cell, his head resting against the damp wall. His breathing was shallow, his mind racing with a million thoughts. This wasn't supposed to happen. His plan had been perfect. He had spent hours rehearsing his speech, perfecting his pathetic look, and even practicing the way he would hold the baby to seem the most vulnerable. But Judge Walters had destroyed everything in a matter of seconds. Now, instead of being a man begging for mercy, he was a criminal of the worst kind, a kidnapper. Peter clenched his jaw. No, there had to be a way out of this. He wasn't going to rot in a prison cell. Not like this. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. He looked up just as his lawyer, Stephen Grady, entered. The man was fuming, his normally slicked-back hair slightly disheveled. He slammed his briefcase down onto the metal table in the center of the cell. What the hell were you thinking, Peter? Stephen hissed. A baby? A baby? Do you have any idea how much worse you just made things for yourself? Peter swallowed hard but said nothing. Stephen exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. Kidnapping, Peter. Do you know what that means? You just turned your fraud case into a life sentence if they decide to go hard on you. I didn't hurt the kid, Peter mumbled. Stephen let out a bitter laugh. That doesn't matter. You took a child. That judge was already looking to bury you. And now you handed him the biggest shovel he could ask for. Peter felt his stomach twist. He already knew all of this, but hearing it out loud made it worse. Stephen sat down across from him, staring hard. Tell me the truth. How did you even get that baby? Peter hesitated. If he admitted it, that meant there was no turning back. But what choice did he have now? He took a deep breath. I went to the house last night. I waited until the mother was asleep and took him through the window. Stephen's face went pale. You broke into a house and stole a child? Peter nodded slowly. Stephen let out a string of curses under his breath and pinched the bridge of his nose. Jesus, Peter. This isn't just kidnapping. This is breaking and entering. Peter's throat tightened. He hadn't thought of that. Stephen leaned forward, lowering his voice. Listen to me very carefully. The only thing that might save you right now is a deal. And trust me, we are going to need one. Peter frowned. A deal? What kind of deal? One where you tell them everything. The truth. You give them full cooperation, and we beg, for a reduced sentence. Peter shook his head. No, there's got to be another way. Stephen's jaw clenched. There isn't another way, Peter. The evidence is stacked against you. They have the security footage from the house, the baby's mother who identified you, and, oh, let's not forget, an entire courtroom of witnesses who saw you try to run with the child. Peter felt his breathing quicken. No, this wasn't happening. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be free. Stephen's voice cut through his thoughts. There's one more thing, he said, his tone darker now. Peter hesitated. What? Stephen sighed, his fingers tapping against the table. The judge. He wants to meet with you personally. Peter froze. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Stephen shook his head. I don't know. But if I were you, I'd be worried. The next morning, Peter was escorted out of his cell and taken through a side door. 2 guards flanked him, their grips firm on his arms. As they reached a private conference room, one of the guards knocked on the door. A deep voice responded from the other side. Let him in. The guards pushed the door open and shoved Peter inside before stepping back. Judge Walters sat at the long wooden table, his hands folded in front of him. His face was unreadable. The room was silent as the guards closed the door behind Peter. Peter shifted uncomfortably under the judge's piercing stare. Then, finally, Judge Walters spoke. Sit down, Mr. Langley. Peter hesitated, then slowly lowered himself into the chair across from the judge. Judge Walters watched him for a long moment before finally speaking again. You have done many things in your life, Peter. But this is a new level of disgrace. Peter's jaw tightened. I didn't mean to hurt the kid. The judge's eyes narrowed. No? Then what was your plan? To hold him for sympathy? To use an innocent child to manipulate this court? Peter stayed silent. Judge Walters leaned forward slightly. Do you know what happens to men who take children, Peter? Even inside prison? A chill ran down Peter's spine. He knew exactly what the judge was talking about. Kidnappers were treated worse than anyone else behind bars. Judge Walters studied him. I should have you thrown away for life. I should. Peter's hands clenched into fists. But, the judge continued, there is something I need to know first. Peter frowned. What? The judge's gaze darkened. That baby. Where did you take him after you kidnapped him? Peter blinked. What do you mean? The judge's fingers tapped against the table. You took the baby in the middle of the night, but when you brought him to court, he was calm, well-fed, clean. You're not a father, Peter, and I highly doubt you know how to care for a child overnight. Peter's heart skipped a beat. The judge leaned in. So where did you take him? Peter swallowed. He had hoped no one would ask that question. Because the truth? He hadn't been alone last night. He had help. And if anyone found out who had helped him, things would get much, much worse. Peter's mouth went dry. His mind screamed at him to lie, to make up a story, to say anything that wouldn't dig his hole deeper. But the judge's eyes were sharp, piercing. There was no room for deception here. Judge Walters sat back in his chair, waiting. Peter clenched his fists under the table. He knew if he said the wrong thing, he was done for. But if he told the truth, he wasn't just putting himself in danger. He was putting someone else at risk too. His mind flashed back to last night. The dingy motel room. The whispered voices. The nervous hands taking the baby from him, rocking him gently. He wasn't alone. And if the judge found out who had helped him, that person would go down with him. Peter licked his lips. I don't know what you mean. The judge's expression didn't change. You expect me to believe that you, a man with no experience with children, managed to keep a baby calm, fed, and unharmed for an entire night? The judge shook his head. Tell me the truth, Langley. Who helped you? Peter's pulse pounded in his ears. He had to think. Fast. I read some parenting tips online, he blurted out. The judge raised an eyebrow. Parenting tips? Peter nodded quickly. Yeah. I used a bottle from the store. Fed him. Cleaned him up. That's all. The judge exhaled slowly. Then, in a voice as sharp as a knife, he said, lying to me will only make things worse. Peter's stomach twisted. He could feel the noose tightening around his neck. Meanwhile, in another part of town, someone else was feeling the weight of fear pressing down on them. Inside a rundown apartment, a woman sat on the edge of her bed, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the news on her phone. Breaking news. Peter Langley arrested for kidnapping infant in courtroom stunt. She swallowed hard. It was everywhere. Every news channel. Every headline. She had helped him. She had held that baby. Fed him. Kept him warm while Peter panicked. And now? Now Peter was caught. And if he talked, if he gave her name, she would be next. She had done it for him. Because she owed him. Because once upon a time, Peter Langley had saved her. Back in the courthouse, the tension between Peter and the judge grew thicker by the second. Judge Walters drummed his fingers on the table, his gaze locked onto Peter. "You're hiding something." Peter forced himself to keep his face still. "I told you the truth," he said, keeping his voice even. Judge Walters let out a small, humorless chuckle. "No, you didn't." Peter's throat tightened. The judge leaned in slightly. "You see, I don't just listen to words, Langley. I watch everything. Body language. Hesitation. The way your pulse is visible in your neck right now." He pointed at Peter's throat. "You're nervous because you're hiding something." Peter felt trapped, like a rabbit caught in a snare. His mind screamed at him to stay silent. The judge tilted his head. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me who helped you, or I'm going to make sure the prosecution throws everything they have at you. And trust me, they will." Peter's hands clenched under the table. He had no good options. If he spoke, he'd betray someone who had risked everything for him. If he stayed quiet, he'd be buried alive in a prison cell. The seconds dragged on. Then, the door to the room suddenly burst open. One of the guards stepped in, his expression tight. "Judge Walters, you need to see this," the guard said. The judge frowned. "See what?" The guard hesitated. Then he handed the judge a folder. Judge Walters opened it, and as his eyes scanned the first page, his expression darkened. Peter felt his stomach drop. Something was wrong. The judge slowly looked up at Peter, his gaze unreadable. "I think we just found our answer," he said coldly. He turned the folder around, and Peter's heart nearly stopped, because staring back at him was a photo, a grainy surveillance image, a woman carrying the baby into the motel, a woman Peter knew, a woman who should have never been caught. His stomach turned to ice, because now she was in danger too. Peter's breath caught in his throat. The surveillance image wasn't just bad, it was damning. The grainy photo clearly showed a woman cradling the baby in her arms, her hood up, but her face partially visible. Peter's blood ran cold. Judge Walters studied him carefully. Then, slowly, he flipped to another page in the folder. A clearer image. A name printed in bold letters beneath it. Peter's stomach twisted into knots. Judge Walters exhaled through his nose. "So, Peter." He tapped the image with his finger. "Would you like to tell me who this is?" Peter swallowed hard. His brain screamed, "Deny it. Play dumb. Say it's a stranger." But there was no point. The woman in the picture was Rebecca Crane, his ex-girlfriend, and now, thanks to him, she was caught up in this disaster. Peter clenched his fists. He never meant for this to happen. Rebecca wasn't supposed to be part of this. She had only helped him because his chest tightened, because she owed him, because, years ago, he had saved her. And now, if he didn't do something fast, she was going to go down with him. Judge Walters watched him closely. "You know her," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Don't bother denying it." Peter kept his mouth shut. Judge Walters sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I'll give you one chance to cooperate, Langley. Tell me everything and maybe, I can convince the prosecution to consider a deal." Peter felt trapped. If he spoke, Rebecca's life was over. If he stayed silent, they'd still find her eventually. But maybe there was a way to spin this. He took a deep breath. "I forced her," he blurted out. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. Peter ran with it. "She didn't know what I was planning," he said quickly. "I showed up at her place in the middle of the night. She was scared. I told her if she didn't help me take care of the baby, I'd turn her in for something she did years ago. That wasn't true. But if they thought she was just a scared accomplice, she might get off easier." Judge Walters studied him. "You forced her?" Peter nodded. "She had no choice." There was a long silence. Then, Judge Walters flipped the folder closed. "Well," he said, his voice laced with something Peter couldn't quite place. "That's very interesting, Peter." Peter frowned. "Why?" The judge slid the folder across the table. "Because we already brought her in for questioning." Peter's heart stopped. "What?" Judge Walters leaned forward, his gaze locked onto Peter's. And guess what? The judge's lips curled into something between a smirk and a grimace. She told us a very different story. Peter felt his body go numb. He wasn't expecting that. Rebecca talked? What had she said? What did she tell them? Judge Walters continued. She said you came to her panicked, begging for help. She said you didn't threaten her, Peter. She said she chose to help you. Peter's breathing grew shallow. Rebecca had protected him. She could have easily thrown him under the bus to save herself, but she hadn't. And now, they both were drowning. Judge Walters sighed, rubbing his temples. You and Miss Crane are both facing serious charges. Peter clenched his jaw. She didn't do anything. Oh, but she did. The judge's eyes darkened. She knowingly harbored a kidnapped child. That makes her an accomplice. Peter gritted his teeth. You can't do this to her. Judge Walters raised an eyebrow. Oh, and why is that? Peter felt a flash of desperation. He had to do something. So he blurted out the truth. Because she saved my life once. The judge went still. Peter exhaled sharply. Years ago, before all of this, I would be dead if it weren't for her. Judge Walters didn't say anything. For the first time, Peter saw something change in his expression. Was it curiosity? Maybe, just maybe, he had finally found something he could use. Something to turn this case around. And if he played this right, maybe he could save both of them. Judge Walters tapped his fingers against the table, his expression unreadable. She saved your life? Peter swallowed. He had no choice now. If he wanted to protect Rebecca, he had to make the judge see her differently. He nodded. Yeah, a long time ago. The judge sat back, arms crossed. I suggest you start talking, Langley, because right now, Rebecca Crane is in just as much trouble as you are. Peter clenched his jaw. His mind raced, pulling memories he had buried deep. How much should he tell? Would it even matter? Finally, he took a slow breath and started. It was 5 years ago, he said, his voice low. Back when I was mixed up with some bad people. The judge didn't interrupt, so Peter continued. I was in debt. A lot of debt. To people you don't want to owe money to. I thought I could talk my way out of it. Like I always do. But these guys weren't interested in talking. They wanted their money. He swallowed hard, remembering the cold fear of that night. I didn't have it, he admitted. So they decided they'd take something else instead. Me. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Peter flexed his fingers under the table. They took me to some abandoned warehouse, beat me up pretty bad, broke my ribs, busted my face. I thought I was gonna die there. He exhaled shakily. And then, she showed up. Judge Walters raised an eyebrow. Peter leaned forward slightly. Rebecca. She came out of nowhere. She had nothing to do with any of it, but she walked into that warehouse and got me out. The memory played in his mind like a film. The way Rebecca had stormed in, fearless. The way she had lied so easily to the men holding him captive, spinning a story that convinced them to let him go. She told them I was worth more alive, Peter said. Said she had a buyer for me. The judge frowned. A buyer? Peter smirked humorlessly. Yeah. She made them think they'd make more money selling me off to someone than just killing me. The judge's eyes darkened. And they believed that? She made them believe it. Peter shook his head. She always had a way with words. More than me, even. And once she got me out of there, we ran. She saved me. A silence settled between them. Peter let his words sink in, hoping, praying, that they meant something. Finally, the judge exhaled. And you repaid that debt by dragging her into this? Peter flinched. He didn't have an answer for that. She had a choice, he muttered. No, she didn't, the judge shot back. Not when it comes to you. Peter felt something twist in his chest. Because maybe, just maybe, the judge was right. He hadn't forced Rebecca to help him, but he had put her in a situation where she felt she had to. And now, she was about to pay the price. Meanwhile, across the courthouse, Rebecca Crane sat in an interrogation room. Her hands were cuffed to the table, and her heart pounded against her ribs. She knew this was going to happen. From the moment she saw Peter standing in her doorway last night, panicked and desperate, she had known. But she had helped him anyway. Because once, a long time ago, She had looked into Peter Langley's eyes and seen something she had never seen in anyone else. Someone just like her. Someone who had spent their whole life talking their way out of trouble. Someone who always thought they were one step ahead, until they weren't. And now, here they both were. The door creaked open. Rebecca looked up as a prosecutor walked in. A tall woman in a dark suit. Her eyes sharp and calculating. She sat across from Rebecca, folding her hands on the table. "Miss Crane," she said smoothly, "do you know why you're here?" Rebecca forced herself to keep her expression neutral. "I have a guess." The prosecutor smirked slightly. "Then you know what's coming next." Rebecca said nothing. The prosecutor leaned forward. "I'm going to make this easy for you. Right now, you're facing accomplice to kidnapping charges. That's a minimum of 10 years. Minimum." Rebecca swallowed hard. "But," the prosecutor continued, "I can offer you a deal." Rebecca's fingers twitched. Here it was. The deal. "I want Peter Langley," the prosecutor said. "The full truth. No holding back. You help us bury him, and we reduce your sentence." Rebecca felt her stomach drop. They wanted her to turn on Peter, to throw him under the bus to save herself. It would be the smart thing to do. The easy thing. She could walk away from this with just a slap on the wrist. But Rebecca had spent her whole life being smart, and she had never once regretted it until she met Peter Langley. She thought about that night in the warehouse, the way he had looked at her, bloody and broken, realizing that someone had chosen to save him when they didn't have to. And now? Now, it was her turn to make a choice. She took a deep breath, and she smiled. The prosecutor frowned. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. "You want Peter?" she said, tilting her head. "Then you're going to have to try a lot harder than that." The prosecutor's eyes narrowed. Rebecca's heart pounded. She had just done something very stupid, and now there was no turning back. Back in the judge's chambers, Judge Walters closed the folder. Peter tensed. "You're in a lot of trouble, Langley," the judge said. "And so is she." Peter swallowed. "She doesn't deserve this." The judge's gaze flickered. "Maybe not. But you made sure she ended up here." Peter clenched his fists. "Do you really want to help her?" the judge asked. Peter hesitated. "Yes." The judge tapped a finger against the table. Then, after a long moment, he said, "There's one way you can do that." Peter's stomach twisted. He already knew what was coming next. Judge Walters leaned in. "Confess." The room fell into silence. Peter's breath felt shallow. A confession meant the end of the road. No way out. No smooth talking his way back into freedom. But Rebecca could walk. If he did this, she would get out. Peter's pulse pounded in his ears. He had to decide. Right now. His lips parted. And then, the door to the judge's office suddenly burst open. A guard rushed in, his face tense. "Sir," he said quickly, "we have a problem." Judge Walters frowned. "What problem?" The guard hesitated. Then, he said something that made Peter's blood run cold. "Rebecca Crane, just escaped custody." The judge's eyes widened. Peter's breath caught in his throat. She was gone. The room froze. Judge Walters shot up from his chair, his face darkening. "What did you just say?" The guard shifted nervously. "Rebecca Crane, she's gone. She escaped during transport." Peter's pulse thundered in his ears. Rebecca ran. Somehow, someway, she had slipped through their fingers. And now, she was out there. Judge Walters clenched his jaw. How did this happen? The guard exhaled sharply. They were transferring her to a different holding facility. During the move, the transport vehicle made an emergency stop because of a roadblock. But when the officers got out to check, she was already gone. The judge finished, his voice cold. Peter clenched his fists under the table. Rebecca had pulled the oldest trick in the book. Cause a distraction. Create confusion. Slip away in the chaos. She was smart. Maybe too smart. Judge Walters turned back to Peter, his gaze burning with suspicion. "Did you know this was going to happen?" Peter forced a confused look onto his face. "How could I? I've been sitting here." The judge didn't look convinced. "You must have known she had an escape plan." Peter shook his head. "Rebecca doesn't plan. She just reacts." And that was the truth. She had never been the type to sit around waiting for things to happen. If she saw an opening, She took it. And now? She was gone. Judge Walters slammed a hand onto the table. She won't get far. Every cop in this city will be looking for her. Peter's chest tightened. Rebecca was smart, but was she smart enough to outrun all of them? And more importantly, where would she go? Somewhere across town, Rebecca Crane weaved through the crowded streets, her hood pulled low over her face. Her lungs burned, her heart pounded, but she kept moving. She had minutes, maybe an hour, before the cops flooded the area. Her escape had been sloppy, rushed. She hadn't planned this, but when she saw the opportunity, she took it. Now, she just needed a place to lay low, somewhere no one would think to look, somewhere she could figure out what to do next. She needed help, and there was only one person in the city who owed her that much. She turned down a dark alley, slipping into a side door of an old pawn shop. The air smelled of dust and old metal. Behind the counter, a man in his late 50s looked up, his eyes widening. Rebecca? She exhaled sharply. Hey, Eddie. The man frowned. Jesus. What the hell did you do this time? Rebecca pulled off her hood and ran a hand through her hair. I need a place to hide. Eddie hesitated. Rebecca knew what he was thinking. He wanted to say no. Helping a fugitive wasn't something anyone did lightly. But she also knew something else. Eddie owed her. You remember that job in Chicago? She said. Eddie's jaw tightened. Yeah, he remembered. That was the time she had taken the fall for him. And now, it was his turn to return the favor. He exhaled. You're gonna get me killed. Rebecca smirked slightly. That's the spirit. Back at the courthouse, chaos erupted. Officers were scrambling, police radios buzzing with urgent chatter. Judge Walters stood still, his mind racing. Rebecca was gone, which meant Peter Langley was now more valuable than ever. He turned to Peter, his gaze sharp. You're not going anywhere, the judge said. Not until we find her. Peter's lips pressed into a thin line, because deep down, he knew she wasn't going to let them catch her. Not this time. Rebecca Crane was officially on the run, and things were about to get a lot worse. Rebecca sat in the back room of the pawn shop, pressing an ice pack to her wrist where the handcuffs had been too tight. Eddie paced the room, running a hand through his graying hair. Jesus, Rebecca, you escaped custody? Do you have any idea what kind of heat is on you right now? She exhaled sharply. Trust me, I've got a pretty good idea. Eddie stopped pacing and stared at her. Why? Why the hell did you risk everything for him? Rebecca frowned. She knew the answer, but saying it out loud felt dangerous. Peter Langley was trouble. He always had been. But she had never been able to turn her back on him. Not when he had saved her once. Not when she saw that same desperate, cornered look in his eyes last night. And not now, when she was the only person who could still help him. Eddie sighed, rubbing his face. You need to disappear. Rebecca shook her head. I can't leave him. Eddie's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't leave him? Rebecca, he's dead weight. You got away clean, and you're risking it all to. What? Save him from his own stupid choices? Rebecca clenched her jaw. It's not that simple. Eddie scoffed. It is that simple. If you go back for him, you're done. They'll catch you, and they'll throw you in a hole so deep you'll never see daylight again. Rebecca tightened her grip on the ice pack. Eddie was right. Going back for Peter was suicide. But her mind flashed back to that night 5 years ago. The cold warehouse. The blood dripping from Peter's busted lip as he sat slumped in a chair, barely conscious. The way he had looked at her, like he had already accepted death. She had saved him then, and she wasn't about to abandon him now. She took a deep breath and looked Eddie straight in the eye. I need a way to talk to him, she said. Eddie threw up his hands. You're insane. Maybe, she admitted. But I need your help. Eddie groaned. You always need my help. Rebecca smirked. And you always give it. Eddie muttered a curse under his breath, then stormed off to the other room. A few minutes later, he came back and tossed a burner phone onto the table. Rebecca grabbed it and quickly dialed a number she knew by heart. Back at the courthouse, Peter sat in the holding cell, staring at the ceiling. He had no idea what to do. Rebecca was gone, which meant she was either free or on borrowed time. The guards had been on edge since her escape. More officers patrolled the hallways, the tension in the air thick enough to choke on. Then, the guard at the desk outside his cell frowned as his radio crackled. Peter barely paid attention, until the guard suddenly turned toward him, his expression unreadable. "You've got a call." Peter frowned. "A call? From who?" The guard gave him a long, hard look before standing up. "No idea. But the judge wants you to take it." Peter's chest tightened. This wasn't normal. The guard unlocked the cell door and led him down a hallway to a small, private office. Inside, a single desk phone sat on the table. Judge Walters stood beside it, arms crossed. The judge nodded at the phone. "Pick up." Peter hesitated. "Who is it?" The judge's eyes darkened. "Why don't you find out?" Peter swallowed hard and slowly reached for the phone. He lifted it to his ear. And the moment he heard the voice on the other end, his blood ran cold. "Hey, Peter." "Rebecca." Peter gripped the phone tighter, glancing at Judge Walters, who watched him like a hawk. Rebecca's voice was steady, but he could hear the tension beneath it. "You okay?" she asked. Peter let out a slow breath. "Well, I'm not the one who just became a fugitive." Rebecca chuckled lightly. "Fair point." Peter clenched his jaw. "You shouldn't have run." Rebecca sighed. "And you shouldn't have stolen a baby, but here we are." Peter winced. "Touché." Judge Walters stepped closer, his arms still crossed. "Ask her where she is." Peter ignored him. Rebecca continued. "Listen, I don't have much time. The city's crawling with cops, and I can't stay in one place for long." Peter swallowed hard. "Then why the hell did you call me?" There was a pause. Then Rebecca's voice dropped, quieter, more serious. "Because I know how we can fix this." Peter's heartbeat stuttered. Judge Walters stiffened slightly. "What?" Peter asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca exhaled. "You have to tell the truth." Peter blinked. "What?" "You need to come clean," she said. "The real story. Everything. Who you stole the baby from. Why. The whole thing." Peter frowned. "Rebecca, if you confess," she interrupted, "they might let you take a deal. And I'll figure out my own way out of this." Peter's stomach twisted. "No," he said. "I won't sell you out." Rebecca sighed. "You don't have to. Just tell your side of the story." Peter hesitated. If he confessed, it was over. No way out. No last-minute escape plan. But Rebecca was right. If he didn't do something, this would only get worse. Judge Walters spoke up, his voice cutting through the silence. "She's smarter than you, Langley. You should listen to her." Peter clenched his jaw. Then Rebecca said something that made his blood turn to ice. "Peter," she whispered, "there's something I didn't tell you." His chest tightened. "What?" She hesitated. Then, finally, she said, "The baby you stole isn't just some random kid." Peter's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean?" Rebecca exhaled sharply. "He belongs to someone dangerous." Peter's stomach dropped. Judge Walters' expression shifted slightly. He was listening closely now. Peter's hands shook as he gripped the phone tighter. "Who?" Rebecca's voice was barely above a whisper. "Vincent Morello." Peter's blood ran cold. Judge Walters' eyes darkened. Vincent Morello. A crime boss. A man no one crossed and lived to tell about it. And Peter had stolen his child. His world tilted. His pulse pounded. This wasn't just a fraud case anymore. This was a death sentence. And now, they were both in deeper than they could ever escape. Peter felt his grip tighten around the phone as Rebecca's words sank in. Vincent Morello. The name alone sent ice down his spine. He had stolen the child of one of the most ruthless crime bosses in the city. A man with blood on his hands, power in every corner, and a reputation for making people disappear without a trace. And now, Morello would be coming for him. For them. Peter's mouth was dry. His voice came out hoarse. "Rebecca, please tell me you're lying." A beat of silence. Then, Rebecca's voice, low and deadly serious. "I wish I was." Peter's heart pounded so hard it felt like it would break through his ribs. He stole Morello's baby? No, this wasn't possible. The baby belonged to some random woman, just a desperate single mother. Didn't it? His mind raced back to the night he took the baby. The quiet neighborhood. The house. The ease of it all. Had it been too easy? Had he just walked straight into a trap? Judge Walters must have seen the panic wash over Peter's face because he leaned in slightly. What did she say? Peter ignored him. Rebecca, he whispered. How do you know this? Rebecca hesitated. Then she let out a slow breath. Because Morello's men have already been looking for the kid, she said. The second I escaped, I checked in with an old contact. Someone who still keeps their ear to the ground. Peter swallowed hard. And Morello thinks someone kidnapped his kid to get to him, she continued. He's not thinking courtroom stunt or fraud case. He thinks this is war. Peter felt sick. This was worse than he could have imagined. If Morello thought his enemies had taken his child, people were going to die. Peter gritted his teeth. How long do we have? Rebecca's voice was grim. Not long. I'm hearing whispers. Morello already sent men to handle the situation. Peter felt his blood run cold. He wasn't going to rot in a prison cell. Not if Morello got to him first. He was going to die. And so was Rebecca. Judge Walters cleared his throat. Langley, he said, his patience wearing thin. Tell me what she just said. Peter turned slowly, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Then, finally, he spoke. I'm dead, he said. The judge's eyes narrowed. Peter exhaled sharply. You don't get it, do you? He gestured wildly, his panic breaking through. I didn't just steal some random kid. I took Vincent Morello's son. Judge Walters' expression remained unreadable, but something flickered behind his eyes. Then he let out a slow, quiet breath. Well, he said, sitting back. That complicates things. Peter barked out a bitter laugh. Complicates things? I'm already a dead man. Judge Walters rubbed his temple. If Morello thinks this was a deliberate attack against him, then he's not going to wait for a trial, he muttered. He'll send men to kill you before you ever see a courtroom. Peter leaned forward, his voice desperate. Then do something. Judge Walters met his gaze. You're assuming I want to help you. Peter felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He was right. Judge Walters had no reason to protect him. Not after everything he had done. Not after he had humiliated the court. Judge Walters could let Morello's men handle the problem for him. Let them take Peter out before the trial ever happened. Then it hit him. There was one thing Judge Walters cared about. One thing that could force his hand. Peter inhaled sharply. The baby, he said suddenly. What happened to the baby? Judge Walters' expression darkened. Peter clenched his fists. If Morello finds out his kid was in your courtroom, if he realizes you had a hand in this, do you think he'll just let that go? A flicker of something crossed the judge's face. There it was. Doubt. Fear. Judge Walters wasn't untouchable. Even he had limits. If Morello thought the court had been involved, if he thought the judge had allowed this to happen, he wouldn't stop with Peter. He would come for everyone. The courtroom. The staff. The judge himself. Judge Walters exhaled sharply, standing up. Stay here. Peter let out a bitter laugh. Not like I have a choice. The judge turned to the guard. Get me the U.S. Marshals. Now. The guard nodded and hurried out of the room. Peter's mind reeled. This wasn't just a legal disaster anymore. This was about survival. The cops wouldn't be fast enough. The law wouldn't be enough. Morello would come, and when he did, there would be no mercy. Peter put the phone back to his ear. Rebecca, he whispered. You need to get out of the city. Silence. Then, Rebecca sighed. It's too late for that, Peter. Peter's blood ran cold. Why? Rebecca hesitated. Then, in a voice so quiet it barely reached him, she said, because Morello's men are already here. Peter's heart stopped. Rebecca let out a breath. I gotta go. Click. The line went dead. Peter's hand shook as he lowered the phone. Judge Walters was already speaking to someone on his own line, his voice urgent, but Peter barely heard him, because all he could think about was Rebecca, alone, on the run, with Morello's men closing in. And Peter? Peter was trapped behind bars, powerless to do anything. Unless, his mind raced. He had one chance. One desperate, insane chance. He had to escape. He had to get to Rebecca before Morello's men did. Before it was too late. Peter's mind was a storm. He had minutes, maybe seconds, before everything fell apart. Rebecca was out there, alone, being hunted by Morello's men, and he was stuck in a holding cell, a sitting duck. Unless he did something. Unless he got out. Judge Walters was still on the phone, barking orders. I need federal protection on this now. No delays. Peter barely heard him. His brain was moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour. He had escaped worse situations, but escaping a courthouse? That was insane. And yet, it was the only option. Peter forced himself to breathe. He needed a plan. Something fast. Something reckless. His eyes flicked to the guard standing near the door, distracted by the judge's conversation. He was just close enough. Peter tensed. He had one shot. Now, with a sudden burst of movement, Peter lunged. He slammed his shoulder into the guard, knocking him off balance. The man grunted in shock, reaching for his baton. Too late. Peter grabbed it first and swung. Crack. The guard went down. Judge Walters whirled around, his eyes going wide. Langley. Peter didn't stop. He bolted for the door, his heart pounding. A second guard shouted from down the hall. Stop him. Peter ran. Everything was a blur. The shouts, the pounding footsteps behind him, the chaos erupting through the courthouse. He shoved past a secretary, nearly knocking her over. Then, the exit. A side door leading to a stairwell. Peter didn't hesitate. He slammed into it and barreled down the stairs, 3 steps at a time. Behind him, the guards gave chase, their voices echoing. Locked down the building. Peter ignored them. He hit the ground floor, shoving through another door, and ran straight into a crowded hallway of reporters. The moment they saw him, cameras flashed. Langley, someone shouted. Did you kidnap the baby? Peter didn't stop. He shoved past them, using the chaos to his advantage. Security struggled to push through the mob. Peter ducked low, slipping past a cameraman, then out the front doors. Into the city. The air was freezing, but adrenaline burned through his veins. He was free. For now. He had one shot to get to Rebecca before Morello's men did, and he wasn't about to waste it. Across town, Rebecca crouched low behind a dumpster, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. She had ditched her hoodie, trying to blend in, but it wasn't enough. They had found her. A black SUV had been tailing her since she left Eddie's shop. She thought she had lost them, until she saw the men step out onto the street, their cold, calculating eyes scanning the alley. She was trapped. Her heart pounded. Morello's men didn't ask questions. If they caught her, she was dead. She needed an out. Fast. The men moved closer, their footsteps slow, deliberate. Rebecca pressed herself against the wall. Then, her phone buzzed. She flinched, scrambling to silence it. Too late. The closest man's head snapped toward her hiding spot. His hand went to his jacket. Rebecca's stomach dropped. Gun. She was out of time. Her only choice was to run. Peter dodged through traffic, his lungs burning. His mind replayed Rebecca's last words. Morello's men are already here. He had to get to her. Had to find her. The courthouse was already swarming with police. He had maybe 20 minutes before they flooded the city looking for him. He grabbed a discarded jacket from a vendor's cart, pulling it over his prison clothes. Then, he dialed the only number that mattered. Eddie picked up on the second ring. You are the stupidest son of a... Where's Rebecca? Peter cut in. Eddie hesitated. She left. But... where? A sigh. She mentioned heading west. Trying to shake them. Peter turned on his heel and sprinted toward the subway. If she was heading west, he knew where she was going. And if Morello's men had found her first, Peter's chest tightened. He wasn't going to let her die for his mistake. Not now. Not ever. Rebecca bolted from her hiding spot just as the first gunshot cracked the air. People screamed. A bullet whizzed past her ear, embedding itself into a brick wall. She sprinted through the alley, dodging trash bins, pushing past a homeless man who shouted in alarm. Behind her, the men chased. She reached the street and made a sharp turn, straight into another black SUV screeching to a stop. The back door swung open. A man in a suit stepped out. He was older, with slicked back hair and cold, dead eyes. He smiled. Vincent Morello. Rebecca skidded to a halt. The men behind her caught up, boxing her in. Trapped. Morello exhaled, shaking his head. I have to admit, he said, his voice like ice, I expected better from you. Rebecca's pulse thundered. Morello took a step closer. You took something from me, he said, and I don't like losing things. Rebecca swallowed hard. This was it. She had no escape, no weapons, no chance. Then, a voice. Casual, calm, and so stupidly familiar. Well, Peter Langley said, stepping into the light, if it isn't the most overdramatic criminal in the city. Rebecca's breath hitched. Peter. He found her. Morello turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Peter smirked, hands in his pockets. Let's talk, Vinny, he said. Morello's eyes darkened. Then he snapped his fingers. The men grabbed Rebecca. Peter's stomach dropped. Morello smiled. I don't do talks. Peter clenched his jaw. Then, suddenly, gunfire erupted. Chaos exploded in the alley. Peter dived behind a car as bullets shredded the air. Rebecca struggled against the men holding her, her eyes wide with panic. And Peter? Peter realized he had one chance left. The only way out. He had to do something insane. He had to bet everything. So he did. Peter stepped out from cover and yelled something that changed everything. Morello, the kid's alive. And I can tell you who really took him. The shooting stopped. Everyone froze. Morello's gaze turned to stone. Peter exhaled sharply. This was it. The final gamble. And if he was wrong, he and Rebecca were already dead. The silence in the alley was suffocating. Morello's men held their guns steady, fingers twitching over the triggers. The tension crackled like electricity, thick and unrelenting. Peter stood tall, trying not to let his legs buckle under the weight of every deadly stare pinned on him. Rebecca's breath was ragged. The men holding her hadn't loosened their grip, but now, they weren't pulling her toward the SUV. They were waiting. Morello's dark eyes bored into Peter's, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he smirked. I don't believe you, he said, his voice smooth as ice. Peter let out a dry laugh. I don't care if you believe me. I care that you're listening. Morello tilted his head. You expect me to believe you suddenly have information about my son? After you paraded him around like a prop in court? Peter clenched his jaw. I stole the baby, yeah, but not from you. Morello's smirk faded. Explain. Peter exhaled. His brain was scrambling, piecing together the puzzle as fast as it could. He didn't have all the answers, but he had enough. I didn't pick that house at random, Peter said. Somebody set me up. The whole thing was too easy, too perfect. Morello didn't respond, but his eyes sharpened. Peter continued, voice steady. They wanted me to take the baby and make a scene. And guess what? I did. And now, you think it was an attack on you. That's exactly what they wanted. Morello studied him. Rebecca looked at Peter like he had lost his mind. Morello took a slow step forward. If what you're saying is true, he said, voice low, then who set you up? Peter's stomach twisted. He didn't know. Not for sure. But he could guess. And if he was wrong, he was dead anyway. So he bet everything. Peter took a breath and said a name. Judge Walters. The reaction was instant. Rebecca's head snapped toward him, her eyes wide. Morello's smirk disappeared. His men shifted, exchanging glances. Peter kept his face calm, but his pulse was pounding so hard he swore they could hear it. Morello's stare darkened. You're lying. Peter shrugged. Am I? Think about it. You've been looking for your kid for weeks. Meanwhile, I magically steal a baby and bring it straight into his courtroom? Morello didn't move. Peter pushed harder. Why do you think I got caught so fast? He said. Why do you think the judge knew the baby wasn't mine? It was too perfect. He let me hang myself, knowing it would cause a scandal. Morello's lips pressed into a thin line. Peter couldn't stop now. And let's not forget, he added, voice softer. He was the only one who had custody of the kid afterward. Morello's face changed. Subtle. A flicker of realization. Peter had him. Where's my son now? Morello asked. Peter exhaled sharply. That's the question, isn't it? Morello's hands clenched into fists. If you're playing me. I'm not, Peter cut in. I don't want to die, Morello. But if we keep standing here, arguing, your real enemy is getting away. The air in the alley shifted. Morello's men glanced at him, waiting for orders. For the first time, Morello looked uncertain. Rebecca's breath hitched. Peter had him on the edge. Now, he just had to push him over. Peter inhaled slowly. Let me go, he said. Let me prove it. Morello's jaw tightened. Then, he nodded. His men released Rebecca. She stumbled, catching herself on the wall, eyes darting to Peter. Morello exhaled through his nose. Find Walters, he ordered his men. Now. They moved immediately, disappearing into the night. Morello turned back to Peter, his eyes cold. You get one chance to be right, Langley. Peter swallowed. I won't need more than one. Morello studied him for another second, then turned to Rebecca. I don't like loose ends, he said simply. Rebecca glared. Then maybe you should tie your shoes better. Peter winced. Morello grinned. Then, without another word, he climbed into the SUV. The car pulled away, vanishing into the city. And just like that, Peter and Rebecca were alive. For now. The moment they were alone, Rebecca rounded on him. Judge Walters? Are you insane? Peter held up his hands. Hey, it worked. Rebecca stared at him. You pulled that out of thin air. Not thin air, Peter corrected. It made sense. Rebecca let out a frustrated groan. Do you even have proof? She demanded. Peter hesitated. Then, finally, no, he admitted. Rebecca let out a bitter laugh. Oh, that's great, Peter. Fantastic. You just put a target on a federal judge's back, and you have nothing to back it up? Peter exhaled. We'll find proof. Rebecca ran a hand over her face. This is suicide. Peter nodded. Probably. Rebecca glared. I hate you. Peter smirked. No, you don't. Rebecca opened her mouth to argue. But sirens blared in the distance. They both tensed. Morello wasn't their only problem. Peter had escaped custody. Every cop in the city would be looking for him. They needed to move. Rebecca shook her head. You better be right about this. Peter met her gaze. If I'm not, he said, we're dead anyway. Rebecca sighed. Great pep talk. Peter grabbed her hand and pulled her into the shadows. They had one shot. Find proof. Find the truth. Before Morello, and the law, found them first. The cold wind bit at their skin as Peter and Rebecca slipped into the darkened alley, their footsteps quick and silent. Peter's heart raced. Every second felt like it could be their last. They had moments, at most, before Morello's men or the cops caught up to them. Where are we going? Rebecca hissed, her voice low but urgent. Peter didn't answer immediately, his mind spinning. He didn't have a concrete plan, but he did have one thing, a lead. He glanced over at her. The courthouse. The records. If we can get to the evidence room. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. You want to break into the courthouse? Peter grimaced. I know it sounds crazy, but the judge's records are there. If we can find proof that Morello was involved, if we can tie him to the kid somehow, we might have a fighting chance. Rebecca exhaled, her breath visible in the freezing air. This is insane. You know that, right? Doesn't matter. Peter's eyes were hard. We don't have time to think. We need proof. Now. She glared at him. And what happens when we get caught, huh? What happens when Morello finds out we're digging around in his business? Peter paused, his gaze hardening. We don't get caught. The look in his eyes told Rebecca he was dead serious. I don't know whether to be impressed or terrified. She shook her head, her voice tinged with disbelief. Peter gave her a small, tight smile. Welcome to my world. They pushed forward through the alley, weaving through the shadows, staying out of sight as much as possible. Every street they passed felt like a new risk, but Peter couldn't afford to waste any more time. The courthouse was still a few blocks away. They kept moving swiftly, avoiding busy intersections, cutting through backyards, and staying as low-key as possible. It felt like a lifetime before they finally reached the old courthouse building. It was towering and cold, its windows reflecting the dim streetlights. Peter nodded toward the side entrance. There's a service door around back. I've used it before. Rebecca didn't look convinced. You've broken in here before? Peter looked sheepish. Yeah, a few times. Rebecca just stared at him. I am not getting arrested for breaking and entering. Peter smirked. Relax. I've got this. They crouched low, moving to the side of the building where the service door was. Peter pulled out a set of lockpicks from his jacket and started working on the lock, his fingers swift and practiced. Rebecca kept watch, scanning the surroundings. The night air was still, but the tension between them was palpable. Then, click. The door creaked open. Peter grinned. Told you. Rebecca rolled her eyes. You're impossible. Keep it down, Peter whispered. They slipped inside, the musty air inside the service hallway almost welcoming after the bitter cold outside. Peter motioned for Rebecca to stay close. They crept down the dark hallway, past storage rooms and utility closets. They reached the back stairs leading up to the records room. It was quiet, too quiet. Peter reached for the door handle, hesitated, and glanced at Rebecca. Stay close. We get in, we get what we need, and we get out. No detours. Rebecca nodded, though her expression was tense. She didn't like this, but she knew they didn't have another option. Peter slowly opened the door, peering into the hallway of the records room. The dim light from the hallway filtered in, illuminating rows of filing cabinets. This was it. The place where every document, every record, and every piece of evidence was stored. He held his breath, then motioned for Rebecca to follow him. They moved quickly, scanning the rows for the records that could give them the proof they needed. Peter walked with purpose, eyes darting between folders and file boxes, mentally searching for anything that could connect Morello to the case. There it was. A box labeled Family Court, case number 301. Langley versus Morello. Peter's heart skipped. He grabbed it and pulled it down from the shelf, feeling the weight of everything that was riding on this. He opened the box and started flipping through the files. Rebecca leaned in. What are you looking for? Peter scanned the papers, his mind racing. He finally found it. A copy of the child's birth certificate, signed affidavits, and, wait, a confidential letter. It was stamped with a red classified mark. Peter read it carefully, his eyes widening as he pieced together the information. This is it, he muttered. Rebecca leaned closer. What is it? Peter's voice was shaky. The baby's mother. She's not just some random woman. He pointed at the letter. This says the baby was placed in witness protection. He was supposed to be hidden from someone. Rebecca's eyes widened. Wait, so the kid really was Morello's? But why would they put him in witness protection? Peter didn't have time to think about that now. They had the proof they needed. The letter also confirmed that the child had been taken from protective custody just days before the court case. Peter grabbed the letter and shoved it into his jacket. We've got what we came for. Let's go. Rebecca nodded. They turned toward the exit, but as they did, a sudden, sharp noise echoed from the hallway. Peter's heart skipped. Footsteps. A door creaked. He looked at Rebecca. We're not alone. Rebecca's eyes widened in panic. Who? Before Peter could respond, the door to the records room suddenly burst open. Standing in the doorway was a pair of uniformed officers, and behind them, two of Morello's men. Peter's mind spun. They had been caught. Without a second thought, he shoved Rebecca toward the door. Go. Rebecca hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. Peter. Go. Peter shouted. I'll hold them off. Rebecca hesitated for only a split second before running. Peter turned, grabbing the nearest filing cabinet and yanking it toward the door. The officers and Morello's men stepped into the room, guns drawn. He could see the shock in their eyes. He was buying Rebecca a little more time. But how much? Peter's breath quickened. He was out of time. Morello's men stepped forward, guns raised. Peter's hand trembled, but he kept his focus. He had one shot to get out of this alive. He was done running.